There comes a point in every offseason where we've just found that we've sat around and thought about it for too long, and we end up getting unreasonably either optimistic or pessimistic about the coming season. And usually it goes in waves. You can talk yourself into whichever way you want to go with it. If you want to be unreasonably optimistic about Pitt football in 2025, there's plenty of reasons to do so. And if you want to be unreasonably pessimistic about it, well, there's plenty of options there as well. Today, we're going to stay on the positive side of things. Today, we're going to stay on the optimistic side of things. I don't have the legal pad, but I've got a green piece of paper right here that has, it's got a lot of things written at the top, but at the bottom, there are 4 reasons I think you should be optimistic about Pitt football in 2025. Why on Thursday, May 29th, are we being optimistic about Pitt football in 2025? I don't have a good reason for that. It's just what we decided to talk about today. So, 4 reasons to be optimistic about Pitt football in 2025. What better thing you could do? What better thing could you do on a Thursday than that? So let's do it right here on the Morning Pitt, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Look, I don't know how optimistic I am about Pitt football in 2025. I really don't. There's so many variables. There's so many unknowns. There's the things that you can't account for in any given season, which is your injury situation, and you're going to lose guys. You're going to add, are you going to say remarkably healthy, whatever it is. You can't really, I think it's even tougher nowadays, and we'll talk about this in a minute, because this is one of my four factors here, four reasons that I think, you can be optimistic about Pitt football in 2025. But one of the other things too is when you're trying to predict on a season, it's really tough nowadays to know what to expect out of other teams. Preseason and off-season rankings are always sort of ridiculous, but it's even more so now. Who really knows what you've got? You can look at returning production, but so many teams are augmented or affected by transfers, either guys they lost or guys they added, that it's almost impossible to really predict what a team is going to be. So it's tough to look at the schedule and say, well, this or that. Well, they've got a good schedule. They've got an easy schedule. They've got a tough schedule, whatever. You might be able to do that, and we're going to do that. That's actually something we're going to do here. So I'm sort of contradicting myself ahead of time. But it's just really tough to make predictions even based on that. So there's a lot of, it can be tough to say, but we might as well sit down and do it here and talk about what this team is, what they're going to be, and at least for today, why you possibly should be optimistic about Pitt football in 2025. 4 reasons. Of course, you know what we always ask you to do: like this video and subscribe to youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. That way you won't miss any of our exclusive Pitt video content, these daily morning Pitt videos, Monday through Friday, every day of the week, a little bit of Pitt sports talk to get your day started. Our live show every Wednesday night at 8:30 p.m. We did that last night, me and Jim Hammett and you hanging out talking about Pitt sports for an hour. And post-game shows, interviews, press conferences, all those things right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. So you want to make sure you don't miss any of it. Like this video and subscribe to youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. You do that, you can turn on notifications, and then you'll get an alert every time we go live or we post new content or whatever it might be that we do here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. And then, of course, go check out the website, Panther-Lair.com. We'll be talking about this video here on the message boards today. We have lots of coverage at Panther-Lair.com, football, basketball, recruiting, transfer portal, all that stuff. And then we also have the message boards where you can interact with other Pitt fans. All day, every day, Pitt fans are hanging out, talking about Pitt sports on the message boards at Panther-Lair.com. You can be part of that conversation as well. And we'll see what kind of conversation today's video generates. 4 reasons to be optimistic about Pitt football in 2025. I might get a lot of people telling me I'm an idiot. That's fine. I said this to somebody the other day. They can't be negative about your content if they're not reading it or watching it or whatever it is. So as long as they're reacting and responding, then at least somebody's checking it out. So I want to know what you think of this. All right. Reason to be optimistic about Pitt football in 2025. I think I saw an over-under on the win total, regular season win total set at 5.5 or something. I think you should take the over. And I'll give you today we've got 4 reasons why. And the number one, well, these aren't necessarily ranked in order. They kind of get from more tangible to less tangible, more sort of real to, I'd say the bottom of the list. The last couple of things that we're going to mention here are a bit more speculative and maybe made up, not real things, but that's okay, because we're projecting the season here at the end of May. And so the first thing I would point to, and I think this is a real thing, and I think this is valuable and this is important to consider, is the returning production. I was trying to collect Bill Connolly at ESPN, I think it is, ESPN.com does, returning production for every school in the country, basically. And he had Pitt in the upper half, I think maybe top 30 or something like that. I forget exactly where they checked in. I was trying to look at Pitt and then all their opponents this season. I didn't get very far because there were a lot of, I didn't want to just copy his work. I wanted to also look at, what they lost to the portal, what they lost to eligibility, what they bring in. And it just became too big of a project. But on the Pitt side, I kind of crunched the numbers on Pitt's returning production. And I mean, it's a lot. It's a lot coming back. Pitt as a team rushed for more than 1,800 yards last season. They have more than 1,400 of those rushing yards coming back, or the players responsible for those rushing yards coming back. That's almost 77% of their rushing yards last year. Passing yards, and this is a really interesting one because obviously, as we know, Eli Holstein only played 10 games, only played, 8 full games? Pitt still has... and they lost, obviously, Nate Yarnell to the transfer portal. They lost Julian Duggar to the transfer portal. They still have 67.5% of their passing yards coming back from a year ago. The players responsible for 67.5% of the passing yards from a year ago are coming back. And I think with the caveat of, Nate Yarnell, and Eli Holstein getting hurt and all that stuff, you have, if Eli Holstein didn't get hurt, you would have close to 100% of those passing yards coming back. And effectively, that's what you've got, 100% of the passing yards in the games when Eli Holstein played, right? So 67.5% of the passing yards coming back. The receiving yards, they took a little bit of a hit, obviously with the leading receiver leaving, running out of eligibility in Kanate Mumfield, but they still returned 60.2% of their receiving yardage from a year ago. Rushing touchdowns, they returned 62.5% of the rushing touchdowns from a year ago. Passing touchdown, they returned 58.6%. Pitt had 29 passing touchdowns last year. Eli Holstein accounted for 17 of those. And that's all back. Obviously, that's 58.6% of that total. Receiving touchdowns, they have 29. Obviously, because they had 29 passing touchdowns, a bit of a statistical oddity there. And actually, if you look at Pitt's online stat sheet, for some reason, and I've never figured out why, they list Raphael Williams twice in the receiving stats. If they don't just entirely double his stats, there's 2 different Raphael Williams Jr.'s listed there, and one of them has less production than the other. One of them caught 6 touchdown passes last year. The other caught 4. And so, but then they add it all together. So if you look at the receiving stats on Pitt's official website, this isn't some fly-by-night blog that somebody's updating once every 2 months or something. This is Pitt's official website. It lists the Panthers receivers as the receiving targets. It lists the Pitt players as recording 33 receiving touchdowns, even though the passing site, if you go to the passing tab, it only says 29 passing touchdowns. How could you have more receiving touchdowns than passing touchdowns? Well, they didn't. It was this other thing with Raphael Williams having 4 extra receiving touchdowns. It doesn't make any sense. Anyway, we take that out. We account for it. They have 18 of their 29 receiving touchdowns coming back. That's 62.1%. So you look through the offense, majority of the offensive production coming back. Some of the biggest dips are in the passing yardage and the passing touchdowns, but those are accountable by the fact that Eli Holstein, only played in 10 games and really only played 8 full games. So that's kind of accountable there. You lost a decent amount of the receiving yardage, but you understand that because your leading receiver is gone. But you've got almost 80% of your rushing yardage back. You've got more than 60% of your rushing touchdowns back. And you've got a healthy portion of your passing stats coming back. Returning production, that's huge. Same thing on defense. 57% of the tackles coming back. Like the total tackles recorded by the team, it was 958, and they have 547 of them coming back. That's 57%. Tackles for loss, They have 71% of the players who recorded 71% of the team's 106 tackles for loss, all coming back. Sacks, 70%. Interceptions, 9 out of 13. They had 13 interceptions as a team last year. They had 9, the players who recorded 9 of them are coming back to this roster. That's 69%. So my point overall here is they bring back a whole lot. And the list of key returning players is much longer than the list of key losses, right? Your key losses from last year, Konate Mumpfield, Donovan McMillan, Ben Sauls. We didn't get into the kicking side. We can stick to offense and defense. Konate Mumpfield, Donovan McMillan, Gavin Bartholomew, who else? Brandon George. And then, you can make a case for like Sincere Edwards. Didn't produce a ton, but a promising young player. But in terms of key contributors last year, guys who put up big stats last year, who were a big part of the production from a year ago, Konate Mumpfield, Donovan McMillan, Gavin Bartholomew, Brandon George. I mean, that's kind of it. Meanwhile, the list of key returners, you're talking about Desmond Reed. You're talking about Kyle Lewis. You're talking about Rasheem Biles. You're talking about Eli Holstein. You're talking about Braylon Lovelace. You're talking about all the defensive tackles. You're talking about those starting corners. You're talking about all those guys on the offensive line, Lyndon Cooper and Ryan Baer and B.J. Williams. You're talking about Kenny Johnson. I mean, they lost significant players. There's no question about it. They lost important players, but they're bringing back even more in terms of volume, in terms of quantity, even more important players as well. So they've got a lot of returning production. I think that's important. I mean, you want that continuity. You want that carryover from year to year, and I think Pitt's got it. So that's one reason I think you could be, unreasonably optimistic about the team this year is that returning production. The second reason sort of ties into that. And I think it's important because you come out of last season and everybody's focused on a 7-6 season. They lost 6 games in a row. They lost to Toledo in the game above Sports Bowl. The whole picture of it leaves a bad taste in your mouth. But I think it's important. It's an important caveat that this team did start 7-0. That when Eli Holstein started a game, with Eli Holstein as the starter, they were 7-3. And 2 of those games, he came out early with an injury. Now, maybe they don't hold on. Maybe they don't beat Louisville, but they probably beat Virginia if he plays the rest of the way. Nate Yarnell came in and played part of one drive and then the final 4 drives of that Virginia game. Now, he had a nice touchdown drive in between, or in the middle of those 4 drives, but he also threw 2 interceptions. So 2 out of Pitt's final 4 interceptions in what ended up being a 5-point game. Nate Yarnell threw interceptions. 2 out of the final 4 possessions, I should say. Nate Yarnell threw interceptions. There was also a missed field goal in there. So there were a lot of ways that game could have been won. Eli Holstein wasn't at his best in that game. He was 10 of 23 before he left with an injury. But still, you'd like to think he gives you a chance to win that game, a 5-point game. Not to mention the nonsense with the officials, but that was a game that was out there. So I mean, Eli Holstein 7-3 as a starter last year, but that Virginia game's in there. It very easily could have gone the other way. If he plays against Boston College, that game could have gone the other way. If he plays against Clemson, that game could have gone the other way. It's not a guarantee by any stretch, but this is the guy who was the ACC Offensive Rookie of the Week 5 games in a row to start the season. This is the guy who started the season 7-0. This is the guy who had 5 games with 300 yards and 3 touchdowns to open the season. Like, he was playing really well. And, I'm not saying they go 12-0 if he stays healthy, but they're probably like 8-4 at worst, 9-3 probably, with a decent chance at 10-2. The only games that I would look at, and I would, out of those final 5 regular season games, and I would say, yeah, they're Eli Holstein or no, they're probably not going to win that one. I would say SMU, and probably Louisville. I don't think they were. I don't think they would beat Louisville even with Eli Holstein. He had a good first drive until he threw an interception in the end zone. But I don't think they beat Louisville with Eli Holstein. But Clemson, Virginia, Boston College, and those games get you to 10, right? So even if you blow one, you're still 9-3. much better than 7-5, and playing in a better bowl game with your starting quarterback with a chance to get win 10 or 11 if you end up going 10-2. So all of this is like realistic, and I think that's important, and it dovetails with the returning production conversation because you've got all these players coming back, and they were all a big part of the team, of the success that the team had last year, where they weren't just beating up on patsies, right? Like they weren't just beating up on Little Sisters of the Poor or whoever it is that they were playing. I mean, they beat two non-conference Power 5 opponents, Power 4 opponents in the non-conference schedule. They won at North Carolina for the first time in forever. Engineered, an impressive comeback on the road at Cincinnati. I mean, like, they played well. They were good in those first 7 games for the most part. Not without their flaws, but they were good in those first 7 games. And you've got a lot of the production coming back from the team that built that record to open the season. And I think that's a reason to be optimistic about 2025. The next thing I would point to is the schedule. And I know what I said at the start, like it's really hard to predict what the schedule's, whether the schedule's good or bad, whether it's easy or it's hard, it's favorable, whatever it might be. It's hard to predict that because you just don't know what the turnover that teams have and what teams are going to be and how they're going to play and all that kind of thing. But I do look at the schedule and I think it's got some opportunities in there. Granted, they have to go to West Virginia. They play Notre Dame. I kind of don't care about those non-conference games. I really don't. Like, the focus is what can you do in the ACC? How far can you get in the ACC? Can you put yourself near the top of the conference by the end of the year? And I know Pitt fans would say, well, if you're not going to make the playoff, the least you can do is beat West Virginia, and that'll make it an okay season. Well, was that an okay season last year? When they beat West Virginia, oh, look, I got the thumbs up because I held the I haven't done that in a long time. Do I get one for a peace sign? Yep, we get some balloons out there. They beat West Virginia last year, and that was little consolation when they ended up losing 6 games in a row to finish the season. So that old, like, well, hey, as long as they beat West Virginia, it'll be all right. No, not really. That's not how it works. They need to take care of business in the ACC. And when you look at the conference schedule, I think there's like 5 schools or teams that are kind of the biggest and baddest in the ACC right now. And it's Clemson, and I would probably put it in this order. Clemson, SMU, Louisville, Miami, Florida State are the biggest and baddest. Florida State obviously coming off a terrible season last year. We'll see if they rebound. I think I have to believe that they will. I just have to think there's enough inherent talent on that team that they will bounce back and have a better year in 2025. Out of those 5, though, Clemson, SMU, Louisville, Miami, Florida State, Pitt only faces 3. So not ideal. You've got 3 out of those 5 teams you have to face, but it's better than facing 4 or all 5 of them, right? So they only get 3 of those 5 teams. Louisville, Miami, and Florida State, who I would put as numbers 3, 4, and 5 on that ranking anyway. They get Louisville and Miami at home, which I think helps. It's not going to make it easy. I think Louisville is going to be a challenge every year, but they at least get them at home. Florida State, game at Tallahassee, that's a tough one. Who knows what that's going to be like? Who knows, what that game is going to be, how Florida State's going to be. It's tough to project because of how bad they were last year. But then you get Miami at home in the regular season finale, and like, look, anytime you play Miami in the finale, there's probably a better than even chance that they've given up by then. They have pulled a Miami, and you'll be able to get over on them. It's like they did in 2022. It's like they did in 2014. Now, Miami didn't give up in 2017. Pitt just got, kind of exposed them a little bit for the frauds that they were. But 2014, 2022, both of those years, Pitt won, and those games were at Miami. But those Miami teams had kind of given up. And I think that's always a possibility with Miami. Now, like I said, as we get further into this list of 4 reasons to be optimistic about Pitt football in 2025, we're going to get a little bit further away from the tangible things and into more intangible things like, oh, Miami might have given up by then. But it's real. It happens. They are Miami, right? So I don't think the schedule's as tough as it could be. And I think there'll be opportunities out there to get wins that look good, even if Florida State may or may not be good, even if Miami may or may not have given up by that point. And here's the last one. And this is this is specious at best, but I'm going to do it anyway, okay? Pat Narduzzi has had, prior to last season, okay, he had 4 seasons where at Pitt where he won fewer than 8 games. 2017 they went 5-7. The next year they went 7-7. 2020 they went 6-5. 2023 they went 3-9. Okay, and then obviously last year 7-6, but we won't count that because what I'm talking about is what happened the next year. And every time Narduzzi has had a season where he won fewer than 8 games, he has improved the win total the next season. 2017 they went 5-7. The next year 7-7. That year they went 2018 they went 7-7. The next year 8-5. 2020 they went 6-5. The next season they went 11-3. 2023 they went 3-9. The next year, which was last year, they went 7-6. 4 out of Narduzzi's first 9 seasons, 10 I guess. 4 out of Narduzzi's first 10 seasons, he won fewer than 8 games. And in every single instance, he turned around and improved the win total the next year. That streak will be on the line this year because they went 7-6 last year. Now, like I said, we're getting away from the tangible, but look, you want things to hang your hat on. You want something to feel confident about. You want something to make you believe that Pitt's going to improve. There's something else for you. Every time he's won fewer than 8 games, he's turned around and improved the win total the next year. Sometimes not by a lot. Sometimes 5-7 to 7-7. Sometimes 7-7 to 8-5. Obviously 6-5 to 11-3 is a big jump. 3-9 to 7-6 is a pretty big jump. But hey, would you take 8-4 next year? This coming season. Would you take 9-3 this coming season? I think anybody would be happy with those. 9-4. Like let's say 8-4 in the regular season, 9-4 with a bowl win. I think anybody would be happy with that. So if you want to get in on that over-under of 5.5 wins, I say take the over because Narduzzi's always improved after a sub-8 win season. Is it specious? Is it a little bit less than concrete, hard-hitting statistical analysis? Yes. But is there something there? Maybe. All right. Like this video and subscribe. YouTube.com/Panther-Lair.com so you don't miss any of our Pitt video content. We'll have our mailbag tomorrow, so there's still time. Get your questions in on the message board at Panther-Lair.com, and that way we will answer as many as we can in tomorrow's Morning Pitt mailbag. It's always one of my favorite episodes of these Morning Pits to do, so jump in there. Post your questions on the message board at Panther-Lair.com, and we will answer as many as we can in the mailbag. Thanks for tuning in today. Hope you've had a great week so far. Enjoy your Thursday, and we will catch up with you tomorrow for the Morning Pit right here on YouTube.com/Panther-Lair.com.